Boom! Best Buy, my order is ready. Hell yeah. Well, my new camera's ready. Just as I'm filming my last video for the day on my old camera. With Avatar: The Last Airbender available again on Netflix, a lot of people are rediscovering the series or discovering it for the first time. So I wanted to look at the Japanese dub version of Avatar: The Last Airbender and just show you guys how things are localized into Japanese and to also teach Japanese through this. So I was only able to find like 1 or 2 clips of the Japanese dub on YouTube to use. I checked on Netflix and there doesn't seem to be a Japanese language track available, unfortunately, so I don't know where to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender in Japanese. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments. So this particular segment that I found is from episode 3, and actually there is not that much, like, not many liberties were taken with this particular segment. So you're not going to see too much of a difference between the English language version and the Japanese language version. We're purely looking at this to learn Japanese and to also just compare how they're a little bit the same and how they're a little bit different. So I'm going to play the Japanese dub track and I'm going to have the Japanese subtitles, the literal English translation of the Japanese subtitles, and then the original Japanese dialogue also included in these subtitles.
Ibukuro-me, urusai zo. Ima食うもの探してやる.
So Saka, he has a really weird voice in the Japanese version. He's all meh, meh. Very deep voiced. So Ibukuro-me, urusai zo. So Ibukuro is stomach, and then me. If you add me after something, you're basically saying, damn you, noun. So Ibukuro-me is like damn you stomach, or damn stomach, or darn stomach. Urusai zo. Urusai means loud, annoying. Zo is like a masculine sort of ending for something. So it literally means like, stupid stomach, you're noisy and annoying, shut up. Ima食うもの探してやる. So ima, now, ku is like a slangy version of taberu, which is to eat. Mono is thing. So right now, eat thing to eat. Sagashite yaru. So sagasu is a verb that means to look for something. Sagashite yaru means I'm gonna do this verb for you. So I'm gonna look for something to eat now. So the original was, hey stomach, be quiet. All right, I'm trying to find us some food. And the literal translation from the Japanese version is, damn stomach, shut up, I'll find something to eat right now. So as you can see, they're extremely similar.
Oi, 俺のアザラシジャーキー食っただろ. 食べ物だったの? 焚き火に火をつけるのに使っちゃった。ごめんね.
And then Saka says, Oi, ore no azarashi jaakii. I didn't even know azarashi before this. I had to look it up. Kutta daro. So again, he's using the ku verb instead of taberu. And that makes sense. Like Saka would use like that rougher Japanese. And note that the pronoun he's using is ore, which is a more like masculine, but also just kind of the generic male I, me pronoun. So, ore no azarashi jaakii. So azarashi jaakii would be seal jerky. Ore no would be mine. So my seal jerky, kutta daro. So kutta, past tense of ku, so ate. Daro. When you end a sentence with that, is it like, isn't it the case that? Blah, 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 blah. So, hey, you ate my seal jerky, right? The original English was, hey, who ate all my blubbered seal jerky? So notice they took out blubbered. And they probably did that because it would just be too many syllables in Japanese if they left it in, so they just left that word out. And in English, the original English, it's who ate all my blubbered seal jerky. In Japanese, it's hey, you ate my seal jerky, didn't you? So the nuance is a little different there, but it's pretty much the same thing. And then Aang says, え、食べ物だったの? So notice that Aang is using taberu instead of ku for the word to eat. And that makes sense. Aang is more like a little more polite. He's a monk. He probably would use terms like taberu instead of ku. He's not so slangy like Saka is. So what? Tabemono, so thing to eat. Datta, past tense, was. No, so was that a thing to eat? Basically is literally what that means. That was food. The original English was, oh, that was food. Pretty much the same thing. And then Aang explains, Takibi ni火をつけるのに使っちゃった. So takibi is like a campfire. 火をつける is to light something ablaze. No ni. So this no ni, sometimes it means but in this case it means for the sake of. So it's like for the sake of lighting a campfire. Tsukacchatta. So that comes from the verb tsukau, which is to use. Tsukachau means like to use up, and it's a bad thing that it happened usually. So tsukacchatta means like I used up this thing and it's kind of a bad thing. It's kind of by accident or a bad result that I used this thing. So, oh, I used it to light the campfire. I used it to start the campfire. The original English was, I used it to start the campfire last night. So again, I think they dropped the last night. It's not a mistranslation. It's simply they didn't have enough syllables with the mouth flaps opening and closing to include yube or sakuya in that Japanese dialogue. So they removed the last night. Gomen ne? With a little question mark. So sorry. In the original English, it was more sorry. But in both cases, it's like nervous, embarrassed, sorry.
なんだと？通りで火がいい匂いしてたわけだ。
And then Saka here says, nandato? So literally that means what did you say? However, in the original English, it's you what? And this is interesting. I often notice translators, myself included, will translate nandato as what did you say? And actually, yeah, it's not quite as good a localization or translation as you what? Or you repeat the verb that you said. Like, I ate your chocolate cake yesterday. You ate what? Like, I think it makes a lot more sense. It sounds better to do you what or you verb what rather than what did you say. So this is an example of a localization. In Japanese, it's a little more natural to say what did you say, but in English, it's a little more natural to be like you what? And then Saka says, 通りで火がいい匂いしてたわけだ. So 通りでblah blah 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 wakeda means that would explain why, or I thought that blah blah blah. Now that makes sense. That's what like dori de something 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 wake. So the something 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 in this case is hi ga ii nioi shiteta. Hi is the fire, ii nioi is a good smell, and then shiteta is like was smelling. So I thought that explains why the fire was smelling good, is like literally what that means. So that explains why the fire smelled so good. The original English was no wonder the flame smelled so good. So yeah, it also has a no wonder vibe to it. It's not like necessarily that explains why, like more literally that it means that explains why, blah blah blah. But it's really more like no wonder, blah 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 blah. And then Aang spots the Patora mountain range. Patora samyaku da. And it's the Patora mountain range. The original English was the Patora mountain range. Or Patola. Then he says, mo sugu tsuku yo. So tsuku is to arrive somewhere. Mo sugu means right away. And then yo is like, I am authoritatively making the statement. I assure you that we will be there very soon. We're almost there. So it literally is more like we'll be there soon, mo sugu. But the original English is we're almost there. But note that we'll be there soon and we're almost there is the same thing. It's the exact same meaning. It's just expressed in two different ways. And then Katara says, An, ki no tera ni tsuku mae ni anata ni shittoite hoshii koto ga aru no. So, An, his name Aang, it's An, romanized that way. I think that works. I thought it might be An, like with a dash, but it's just An. So Kinotera. So in Avatar: The Last Airbender lore, if you're familiar with the series, there are firebenders, earthbenders, waterbenders, and airbenders, and Avatar is the last, and Aang is the last airbender. And the series in Japanese is actually called Airbender. It's not called like Avatar. It's just called Airbender. But interestingly enough, the people are called Benda, but the element is not in English. It's not like Airbender, Firebender, Asubender. Actually, Asubender would be hilarious because it sounds dangerously close to Assbender. But anyway, they use the one Chinese character for all of the elements. So Hi no Benda would be firebenders, Chi no Benda would be earthbenders, Mizu no Benda or Mizubenda would be waterbenders. So you got Hi Chi, or sometimes pronounced tsuchi, and mizu, those are each single characters to express fire, earth, and water. But air is kuki, which is two characters, and the ku is sort of like the sky or also empty. And then ki, ki can mean so many different things. It's like, chi, as in Tai Chi, or just chi, like a person's chi, spirit. That's kind of what ki is by itself. So even though it is a stand-in for air, basically the element air, it's still just ki in this translation. So it gives airbenders kind of this different layer that they didn't have in the original English. Instead of just simply being airbenders, they're sort of air/spirit benders. Which kind of makes sense because they're all, monks, basically. They're all like nomadic monks. So that kind of goes with it anyway. But I think the reason why they reduce it to just ki instead of like kuki is because just for the consistency of only one kanji for each element. So that's just an interesting element there. And it's also interesting because when I first heard him say kinobenda or kinotera, I thought I was just mishearing it because my brain immediately thought of this kanji for ki, which is wood. Or tree. So I thought, wood bender or tree bender. But no, it's like air bender, but also sort of spirit. So that's just an interesting layer that the Japanese version has that the English version doesn't have, even though the English version's the original. So anyway, kinotera would be the air temple, or the ki temple, basically. Nitsuku, so kirotera nitsuku is to arrive at the air temple. Mae ni, so before we arrive at the air temple, anata ni shitoite hoshii koto ga aru no. So shitoite means to have it be known, like to know something, and then you know this thing, and now it's in your pocket. It's sort of that concept of knowing something. It's like if you change a verb to the te oku version, it means that you're like doing this verb for later use. So shitoite is a contraction version of shite oita or shite oite hoshii. So hoshii is I want you to, shite oite. So I want you to know this thing for later, before we arrive at the air temple. So it's ang, before we get to the temple, there's something I want you to know, basically, is what that means. And the original is ang, before we get to the temple, I want to talk to you about the airbenders. So note that that's different. It's basically the same premise. Katara's like, hey Aang, all your friends are dead. Basically, she's trying to kind of break it to him gently and say, hey Aang, don't get too excited. That's sort of her motivation in saying this sentence. But in the original English, she says specifically, I want to talk to you about the airbenders. But in the Japanese version, she's just saying, before we get to the air temple, there's something I want you to know. She doesn't say specifically about the airbenders. It's just, there's something that I want you to know. And I think this goes back to Japanese, tends to just be a little more vague than English. But it's not a mistranslation that they left out the whole, I want to talk to you about the airbenders, and she's instead saying, there's something I want you to know. It's basically the same sentiment. It's the same motivation. She's still trying to break it gently to Aang that his clan is dead. Aang says, Nandai? So that dai ending, it's sort of like nanda, would be what, but nandai, it kind of softens it sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't soften it. It's just an interesting way of ending your sentences, either in kai instead of ka, or dai instead of da. So in Japanese, that just means, what is it? But in the original English, it's what about him? And it's because in the original English, she said, there's something I want you to know about the airbenders. And he's like, what about the airbenders? But in the Japanese version, she didn't say, I want you to know about the airbenders. She just said, I want you to know something. So in the Japanese, he's like, what? What something? He's just being very innocent. Katara explains, ne? So that's usually like, well, you see, it's like this. Tera o miru mae ni. So before you see the temple, miru is to see. So tera o miru mae ni. The last sentence was tera ni tsuku mae, before we arrive at the temple. This is before you see the temple. Tera o miru mae ni, kokoro no junbi o shita hoga ii. So kokoro no junbi is a very commonly used phrase. It literally means like preparations of your soul. So It really means like to brace yourself for bad news or sometimes good news. But it's like to brace yourself emotionally for something. So kokoro no junbi o suru is like to brace yourself emotionally for something. Kokoro no junbi o shita is to have done that already, to braced yourself. So shita hou ga ii means it would be best if you did this verb, and the verb in this case is kokoro no junbi o suru. So it would be best if you prepared yourself emotionally before you see the temple. So, well, you should brace yourself before you see the temple. The original English is, well, I just want you to be prepared for what you might see. So as you can see, even though it's worded a bit differently, some things are left more vague in the original English, some things are left more vague in the Japanese translation, it's still pretty much the same sentiment. Katara continues to explain, Hinokuni no yatsura wa zangyaku yo. So Hinokuni, that would be the Fire Nation in Japanese. Kuni means country, but also kingdom, nation, all of those things. So Hinokuni, Fire Nation. No yatsura. So yatsura means like the bad guys. So the bad guys of the Fire Nation. Wa, as for the bad guys of the Fire Nation, zangyaku, they're ruthless, they're cruel. So in Japanese, the Fire Nation bastards or fiends are ruthless. And in the original English, it's just the Fire Nation is ruthless. So that's an interesting slight difference there. In the Japanese, she's saying the people of the Fire Nation are ruthless, whereas in the original English, she just says the Fire Nation is ruthless.
私の母さんを殺した。あなたの仲間も殺されたかも。
私の母さんを殺した。私の is my, 母さん, mom, を殺した. 殺した is the past tense of to kill, 殺す. So they, in parentheses, killed my mother. あなたの仲間 your nakama. So I left that as nakama in the subs, kind of as a joke, a little homage to that translating snafu that happened in fan subs in the past. But nakama, it means a lot of different things. It can mean your friends, it can mean your comrades or your allies. It can also mean just the people like you, your kin, your people. Mo korosareta kamo. So kamo means maybe, it's short for kamoshirenai. So, anata no nakama, your friends, allies, people, kinsmen, mo, also, korosareta. So, korosareru is like the passive version. It's to be killed versus to kill. So, korosu is to kill, korosareru is to be killed. So, korosareta means like to have been killed, were killed. So, your allies, your nakama, your kin, your people, your friends might have also been killed. So in Japanese, they killed my mother, your nakama might have also been killed. I'm leaving it as nakama to show you guys how nakama can indeed be translated into English. So this is what it was in the original English. They killed my mother, and they could have done the same to your people. So people. Nakama can mean your people, your kin, your family, your allies, your friends. And it's really up to the translator or localizer to choose which one of those words fits the best for nakama, in which case. And yeah, your people makes the most sense. The other airbenders, basically. The other people like you.
キノベンダーが姿を消したからってみんな殺されたとは限らない。きっと逃げたんだ。
Aang says, kinobenda, so ki, no benda, benders of ki, which is their stand-in for air. Kinobenda ga sugata o keshita kara te. So sugata o keshita means made their silhouettes disappear. That's literally what that means. But sugata o keshita just means disappeared. So kinobenda ga sugata o keshita means the airbenders disappeared. Kara, so since, because the airbenders disappeared. And then small tsu followed by te turns it into a just because the airbenders disappeared. And then you're going to go on to say, that doesn't mean blah, 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 blah. That's what that te does. So, minna korosareta, so there's korosareta again. Minna is everyone, so everyone was killed. To wa kagiranai. So, to wa kagiranai means it's not necessarily the case that. This isn't the only conclusion that one could draw from this. So it's not necessarily the case that everyone was killed, just because they all disappeared. So just because the key benders disappeared, that doesn't necessarily mean all of them were killed. In the original English, it's just because no one has seen an airbender doesn't mean the Fire Nation killed them all. So note, just because no one has seen an airbender versus just because all the airbenders disappeared. It means the same thing. It's just a different way of wording it. Doesn't mean the Fire Nation killed them all. So in the English, she's being more, not she, Aang, is being more explicit. Doesn't mean the Fire Nation killed them. Whereas in the Japanese, he's being more passive. Doesn't mean that they were killed. But it means the same thing, because they've been talking about the Fire Nation being ruthless. So as you can see, even though it's literally not the same thing, it's basically the same thing. Aang says, in denial, kitto nigetanda. So kitto means surely. Nigeta means to have escaped. Nigeru is to run away or to escape. Nigeta would be the past tense, so surely they escaped. So nda, if you're ending your sentence with nda, you're explaining yourself or you're defending yourself. So he's explaining and defending himself. It's like, hey, Katara, you're wrong. Just because they're gone, that doesn't mean they're dead. I'm sure they just ran away. Trust me. So in Japanese, they surely escaped kitto, versus in the original, they probably escaped. And it's pretty much the same sentiment. It's Aang basically just being in denial. They probably escaped. I'm sure they escaped. That sort of sentiment. Katara says, shinjitakunai no wa wakaru. So shinjitakunai comes from shinjiru, which is a verb that means to believe. So shinjitai would mean want to believe. Shinjitakunai means don't want to believe. So shinjitakunai, don't want to believe, no wa wakaru. So I understand that. Wakaru is understand. I understand that you don't want to believe it, or I understand why you don't want to believe it. So I understand why you don't want to believe it. And in the original English is, I know it's hard to accept. So again, different word choices, but still pretty much the same sentiment. Aang's in denial. Katara is trying to bring him gently to reality, so it's not a huge shock when they get to the air temple and discover that everyone is dead or gone, or that there's blood everywhere from the carnage. Same sentiment, same meaning, different words. And then Aang defiantly says, wakatte nai no Katara. So wakatte nai, wakaru means to understand. Wakatte nai means you are not in the state of understanding. So wakatte iru means like I am understanding. Wakatte inai means I am not understanding, or you are not understanding in this case. And that's pretty much exactly the same in English. It's you don't understand, Katara. You don't understand, Katara. Even though literally it's like you are not understanding, Katara. That's an intentionally bad translation of the Japanese. It's really you don't understand, Katara. Sora tobu bison. So sora is sky, tobu is fly. So sky flying bison, basically. So that's their word for flying bison, is literally a sky flying bison. So sora tobu bison ga inakya. So the inakya is without the existence of. So without the existence of a sky-flying bison, kinotera ni wa ikenai. So ikenai means not able to go. Ikeru is able to go. Ikenai is unable to go. So without a sky-flying bison, you cannot, or one cannot go to the ki temple, the air temple. So without a flying bison, you can't go to the air temple. The original English was the only way to get to an airbender temple is on a flying bison. So pretty much the same thing, except you notice they flip-flopped the order of things. In Japanese, it's without a flying bison, you can't get to an air temple. In English, it's the only way to get to an air temple is on a flying bison. So it just flows a little bit more naturally with that sentence order in English, whereas in Japanese, it flows a little bit more naturally with it the other way. And this is something that a lot of translators, myself included, often miss when we're translating Japanese to English, is we'll sometimes keep that sentence order in Japanese when we really should flip-flop it because it sounds more natural in English the other way. Hinokuni ni sora tobu bison ga inai ya. So Hinokuni, the Fire Nation, sora tobu bison, flying bison, wa inai. So inai is don't exist. And then the ya is kind of like a sort of ending to your sentence. So there, kind of ending to your sentence. So there are no flying bison in the Fire Nation. And in English, it was, I doubt the Fire Nation has any flying bison. So I think the doubt, and I doubt the Fire Nation has any flying bison. I think that's where that ya ending was sort of, that's where they got that ya because, and I doubt the Fire Nation has any flying bison. It has that kind of, get out of here feel to it, just like the ya ending to a sentence has. Na, ba, that means right up, ba. And then yip yip in the Japanese version is ya ya. And the reason why they did this, I'm sure, is the Japanese language does not have ye. That's one of the most difficult sounds for Japanese speakers to make, actually, because if you think about it, yi or ye is made by two e sounds together really quickly. Yi. That's how you make a yi sound or a ye sound. And they don't have an I sound in their language either. So yeah, yip yip is one of the most difficult things for Japanese people to say. So that's probably why they just did ya ya, because that's a lot easier to say. Which is a shame, because yip yip is really cute.
ほら見て、南の木の寺だ。うわあ、すごい眺め。着いたよ、アッパ。ふるさとに。
ほら見て、南の木の寺だ. So hora means you see or hey or look. And then mite also means look. So hora mite is like, see, look over there. Minami no kinotera. So kinotera, air temple. Minami no is of the south or southern. So the southern air, it's the southern air temple. So see, look, the southern air temple. And the original English, it's there it is, the southern air temple. So they're not saying see the southern air temple. They're just saying there it is. But same sentiment, same meaning. Katara says, sugoi nagame. So sugoi means amazing. And then nagame is like a view. So literally it means like amazing view. But in the original English, she just said, "Eng, it's amazing." So she didn't say view at all in the original English, but the Japanese took a liberty and added in view. Because that's pretty common. They'll say "ii nagame" or "sugoi nagame," like "look at the view" or "what a view." That's kind of what it means. They're more likely to say that kind of phrase with nagame than we are to say view. So that's kind of why it's that way. Eng says, "Tsuita yo appa." So tsuita is the past tense of tsuku, which is to arrive. So tsuita yo, I assure you, we have arrived, appa. We're here, appa. And the original English is, we're home, buddy. And the reason why this breaks up strangely is the very next line is furusato ni. Furusato means one's homeland. So if you take those two little sentences that are split up and put them together, tsuita yo appa furusato ni, it becomes like furusato ni tsuita yo, which means we have arrived at our homeland. We have arrived at our home. That's kind of what that whole sentence is if you smash it together into one sentence. But since it's in two fragments, the way it works in the original English is, we're home, buddy. We're home. But in Japanese, furusato is already so many syllables. He wouldn't be able to say like, furusato ni tsuita yo, appa. It's like way too many syllables, so they split that up into two thoughts. Tsuita yo, appa, we're here, we have arrived, appa. Furusato ni, to our home. So I hope that was a little enlightening to show how things are localized into Japanese from English. You can actually learn a lot on how to localize into English by looking to see how the professional localizers localize things into Japanese. And the next time you're outraged that someone has like added a word or changed a word slightly in a localization of anime into English, note that this happens all the time in good localizations of English things into Japanese as well. It is not wrong, it is not bad, it is in fact very good and very natural. I'd like to look at more of these Japanese dubs of famous English language stuff in the future. I don't know what I'll do next. Disney's kind of off limits because they're so crazy about their copyright stuff, but who knows? We'll see. At this point, I want to thank all of my newest patrons. A lot joined in May. We have Matt, Nicholas, DB Dragoner, Katrin, Glenn, Antonio, Jennifer, Guillermo, Review of Zelda, Janet, and Simon. Thank you to all of you new patrons and all of the already existing patrons who support all of the series on this channel. Yip yip! I'm going to trip and fall over my power cord.